Here we are with another Pinnacle Combat Sports podcast. I'm with my buddy Dan, as always. Dan, how are you?
Good, man. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Today we got a special episode. We're doing a episode that we're calling a FlashBack episode. And we came up with this idea because we could do this unlimited. We could just go back and talk about old fighters. We could talk about old events. And we can do like a really deep dive on some of these things. Hopefully we do a good job on this one. It's about Mark Coleman, the first ever UFC Heavyweight Champ.
Very fitting.
Very fitting, yep. Yeah, it's very fitting for a first one to have the first champ as the, I want to say guest, but I wish we could talk to him, but.
that'd be so cool. But no, more so, do you figure it's fitting for the timing's perfect because it's fresh off of UFC 300. He literally put the BMF belt, right? So
exactly,
that's cool.
Yeah,
it's the perfect time to do a Mark Coleman, fresh off the Denver trip, Jimbo. It was awesome, right? So
yeah, Denver was great, man. Denver was awesome, and we'll have to do.
That's kind of what sorry, Jim. That's kind of what spawned the idea with this whole thing too. So it's kind of cool too. We're just kind of sitting around Denver talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, so, Denver was great. For anyone who's never been, Denver's awesome. Definitely check it out.
Very cool.
And we'll probably do more in the future, more trips like that based around a UFC or some kind of sporting event, just so we can...
Next time we need to go to one.
Yeah, that'd be cool too. Yeah, either way. But before we get into Mark Coleman real quick, there's been a couple announcements. What was the one that you were telling me about? I don't think it's on... I don't know what card it's on.
Oh man, I'm gonna blank his first name, I believe, but it's that one I was telling you about, the undersized Brazilian heavyweight, Gelton Almeida. He's really good, but I think he's been bulking up a little bit, or he's not. That's what's weird saying undersized. He's not a small guy, but he's just small for a heavyweight. He's fighting. Speaking of bigger heavyweights, he's fighting. I know he's not from Russia, but it's over the Eastern Bloc area. I can see the flag, but I can't think of his first name might be Alexander, but his last name's definitely Romanov. I can't remember the card that I know it's a new announcement. I think it's a co-main event. That's a really good fight. But we can get into that big one you mentioned, because that really is the biggest one mentioned since those previous two that we heard after 300.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and that one was, I think they announced it yesterday. I texted you about it yesterday, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And the one we're talking about, for everyone, whoever doesn't know, it's Jamal Hill has signed a new contract less than 7 days after fighting Alex Pereira at UFC 300 to fight Khalil Roundtree. What do you think about that fight, Dan?
Well, first, it's like you were saying that yesterday. It's like it's a good quick turnaround. I agree. I don't think it's as much as it's not fun to get hit by someone like Pereira. It wasn't the same thing as, say, Holloway knocking out Gaethje, right? So it's not going to be the same necessary type of layoff that you'd expect, I guess, right? So I think a lot of people were thinking that might be too quick, but I think it's fine. It's good. It's great. Like, it's good to just want to get it right back. You saw a video of him like dancing, I think, the day after. Like, you could tell it didn't break him, which is good. A lot of young fighters get really discouraged when they get to the mountaintop the first time, but a lot of times, he already won the belt. So a lot of young fighters get discouraged when they make it to the top and they get knocked down, but that's just a part of the game. So it's just, it's no knock on him, and it's kind of points for jumping back so quickly, right?
Yeah, and also I think given, where he's at, coming off that injury and then fighting, who could very well be like one of the next biggest legends in the sport.
You kidding? Exactly.
Yeah,
so.
I think like coming right back and getting back into it this quick is actually a really good idea for him, just so you don't... Because if you took some time off, you might lose allure with the fans. Like, you want to keep people interested in what you're doing and your name and your legacy and what, and all that. So I think it's a good idea to get back in there. And it's still, it's June 29th, so end of June. So you're talking 2 months.
It's not like oh, for sure. It's not like it's crazy egregious too soon, but I think it was something a lot of people might have thought of, but I completely disagree. I think it's a good move. Get right back on there.
And I think that's going to be a great fight. Same card as Connor Chandler too, so that's going to be awesome.
Right.
June 29th.
Right. You make a big splash on that card. It's a smart business move as far as Jamal Hill. I don't know, I'm sure he thought about it, but even if he didn't, it's just a smart move to be on a card because of that particular name. You know who it is, so a lot of people are watching.
Exactly. Yep.
That might not otherwise, right? So good move. I like it.
Let's get into Mark Coleman. We're obviously gonna miss some things. We can't get everything, and he's had such a long career of wrestling and fighting in the UFC. He also did some pro wrestling in his career, but we'll try to hit all the important stuff and
especially other accomplishments like you said. I can't say it.
So Mark Coleman was born December 20th in 1964, which makes him 59 years old right now, in Fremont, Ohio. His nickname is Mark the Hammer Coleman. And for people who don't know, he actually coined the phrase ground and pound. He was the guy. Yes, he was the ground and pound grandfather, or what is it?
Isn't he the godfather of ground and pound? Is that correct?
Yeah. The godfather of ground and pound. Yeah. He mostly fought in light heavyweight and heavyweight. He was a freestyle wrestler out of Ohio. He was an NCAA Division I wrestling champion for, I think, Ohio State, right?
I believe so, yeah.
The Buckeyes. He's won multiple Pan Am championships. I mean, there's so much.
I know the accomplishments don't really seem to ever stop with these type of guys, especially for way back in the day.
Yeah,
like the true OGs.
Yeah,
the pioneers,
won the Big Ten championship in 1988, first place at 190 pounds.
Year I was born, baby.
There you go. Boom. Division I champion, 190 pounds, first place in 88 as well. The Pan American champion, freestyle wrestling, first place in 1990, first place in 1991. He fought in the 1992 Summer Olympics in Spain.
Turns out this man can wrestle, huh?
Apparently, yeah. And he got 7th place in the Olympics, but still, I mean, top 10 in the world. This guy is a beast. And I listened to a podcast. I can't remember the name of the podcast, but he was talking about, like, literally as a growing man, his only goal was to be bigger, faster, and stronger than everyone else in whatever environment he was in, whether it was at college or high school or the Olympics, or it was always just bigger, faster, stronger. That was his whole thing.
Seems to be a great goal, and it seems to have translated well.
I would say so. We'll get into some other things about him, obviously, but did you remember watching Mark Coleman when we were younger?
I just remember watching all the events through the years, and you just saw so many highlights. So it's like I've seen fights for sure, but it was never something that was. It was back when I wasn't quite into, like I wasn't able to watch. I believe it was probably the time difference that was probably a big one when he was in Pride, right? So I think a lot of it was back then. I just didn't know when they were, and I would always hear about it, but I wouldn't be able to catch it.
Yeah.
But like live, I would say. But I've watched a ton of his fights. Yeah, they're not as fresh because I haven't watched them recent. But it's like you just remember that name was really the godfather of ground and pound, was really true to how. That's exactly what it looked like. He was trying to just punch through you into the canvas. So which is kind of cool, because I think a lot of fighters play it too safe these days, where they just want to have the position. And I'm not even saying it as a bad thing. I'm saying it's smart to do that, but it's like you kind of like to see those. I just think that breaks a lot of these fighters' patterns too. They're not as comfortable if you're a little more chaotic than as far as a little more predictable. I think that's why Tito Ortiz was such a great ground and pound specialist too, because he would really get in the tight spots and he would just always deliver. That was his point. He's there to make the same thing Coleman. He's there to make that. That's exactly what he's there to do.
Yeah.
Which he had a lot of submission wins too, which is great. Like you figure that goes hand in hand. Like we were talking about him before. He's had like some badass submissions. You figure, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but he has 2 separate wins via scarf hold submission. And I don't know if I'd be willing to say there's not another fighter with 2, maybe, right?
Yeah, probably not.
That's it's a pretty random fact, but you also have a submission win by can opener. This is this is an OG. Like, just the way he would win too. I mean, he has probably the craziest wins via stoppage. He doesn't win by a broken arm. Like he's just a wild man. He was it seemed like he was great at everything he did when it came to athletically, right?
Yeah, and it's very fitting that he was putting the belt around the baddest motherfucker.
Are you kidding me? Yeah, I mean, also fitting. You figure the longevity of his career, and then he also fought and won at UFC 300.
Oh, UFC 100? You mean
100? Jesus. Did I say? Oh, that's a flip. He would have been ready to go, baby. But but no, he had fought and won at UFC 100. Excuse me.
Yeah.
But we should also make sure we make a big point to talk on that, and just to talk about, you figure, courage and bravery as a fighter, but talk about someone who goes into a burning building and saves his family.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we're doing this whole thing. I mean, and
big time, 100%.
He's a bad motherfucker inside and outside of the octagon. I mean, not
yeah,
many
there's no
people.
off button.
Yeah, not many people. I should say civilians would run into a burning building.
I love that word. Yes, it's true.
It's scary.
It's very true.
I'm sure it was probably the scariest moment of his life. Even though
Absolutely.
Considering he's fought some of the scariest guys in the world, running into a burning
home
in
comparison
is that's a different beast.
Yeah, I would think you would agree, right? Yeah, I'm sure. But I mean, also at the same time, he's also thinking, like, especially with the mentality he has his whole life, he probably didn't even think twice about it, right?
He probably didn't even think he had a decision. He's like, I have to do this. Yeah,
there's no decision to make. Yeah, with someone such as that, you hope you'd have like an ounce of that kind of courage, So
yeah. With all that said, let's get to so UFC 12 it wasn't his first UFC. I think he fought in UFC 10 and 11 as well. But UFC 12 was where they had basically, so for people that don't know, and I just kind of found this out myself, I kind of knew, but UFC back in the day was wild. Before Dana White and the Fertitta brothers bought it, it literally, there were only two rules in UFC, and it was no biting and no eye gouging. That was it. You could hit people in the nuts, you could headbutt, you could do basically everything else. You could wear shoes.
That'll be a good segue, Jim.
What?
That'll be a good segue. Okay, so you said groin shots, correct?
Yeah.
I believe. Okay, so Mark Coleman fought Gary Goodridge, and I'm pretty sure Gary Goodridge was the fellow that like mushed someone's genitals at one point in the fight, which is about as wild as it gets. Yeah. But that was back when 10 and 11, UFC 10 and 11. That was back when it was tournament based too. So you figure that kind of speaks to what you're saying, how wild it was, right?
Yeah, these guys would have to fight like 3 times in one night.
Yeah. These guys today, like, they're all killers. If you fight one killer, these guys have to fight 3 killers.
Yeah.
Same night. Wild. That's just,
Yeah, and that's what he had to do to win that first ever heavyweight championship. So that's what I was going to get to. I forgot. Basically, before there was a heavyweight belt, there were 2 other belts. One was called like the Super Fight Championship, and I think the other one was called the Ultimate. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that when Mark Coleman won the heavyweight championship at UFC 12, it combined those belts into one heavyweight championship belt. So he had all 3 belts.
It's pretty badass, huh?
At the time, I think. But he had to beat 2 other guys to get to the belt to fight Don Fry.
And that's at UFC 10, you're saying? Is that what you were talking about? Because I know he's fought Don Fry multiple times, but I think he definitely fought Goodridge in UFC 10. And then I'm also not familiar with his first opponent. Modi Orenstein. I don't know if I remember seeing him fight.
Yeah, I don't notice the name either.
Yeah, okay. But he beat him by submission due to punches.
He gave up to punches.
Yep. That's a pretty wild. That kind of speaks to. That's a good stat for someone back in the OG days. You figure this man beat someone by submission to punches, and then the next fight he won submission due to exhaustion. So he really that just kind of speaks to like he put a pace on you that would like might have felt like it was life threatening.
Yeah. And it sounds so weird to say things like that, like submission by exhaustion. But
people don't know. Yeah, they're like, "Oh, you got tired." It's like, you don't even know. I've never been. Like, you've never been. None of us have been in that kind of position of that exhaustion, I bet.
Yeah, and the UFC back then, it was prize fighting. Like, these are just random tough guys that you'd see at a bar that like was like, "Oh, I could beat that guy's ass. I'll sign up for UFC. I'll get in the cage." It wasn't like it is today. Like, there's, gyms all over the country and all over the world where people go and they spend years on their craft, whether it's, wrestling or jiu-jitsu or kickboxing or whatever. Like, these guys, anybody could have signed up, and sometimes they did. And the crazy thing about that too is like there was no weight class, so this was like an open weight thing. Anybody could sign up. A lot of the times they didn't have gloves back in the day. You didn't know what you were going to get into. And again, you had to fight, like, if you won, you had to fight someone else. It wasn't the end. You had to fight multiple times a night. So these guys, like, I mean, we say this every week, I think, but they're bad guys. Like, they're crazy. They're, they're like the strongest and the craziest of the, it's insane.
Absolutely. These are some bad hombres, Jimbo.
Bad hombres.
It's a great word. Love it.
Hombre. Yeah.
Got to say it more. I got to say it daily.
Yeah.
Got to get used to it. Yeah. I want it to become just a natural function of my life. Hombre.
Also, little tidbit here, or two of them. UFC 12 was also, so the night that Mark Coleman won the first ever UFC Heavyweight Championship was also Joe Rogan's first UFC event that he worked.
That's really cool.
And it was also the first UFC event that Vitor Belfort fought in. Wow.
Very, very historical. UFC 12, huh? That'd be a good trivia question.
Yep. Dothan, Alabama.
Oh, wow. Dolphin.
Yeah.
Wow. That's funny. Joe Rogan had I don't know if I should even say it. It's not really pertinent. But go ahead, Jim.
Guess what the attendance was?
UFC 12. It was more than 12, right?
What?
More than 12 people?
It was definitely more than 12 people, yeah.
All right. Good. All right. I'm going to say 2,500.
Close. 3,100 people.
Wow.
3,100 people.
I was trying to figure what. It's a lot of people you figured back then.
Yep. And it was in February of 1997.
Wow. That's awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah. So Mark Coleman's been around a long time. And I think he retired in 2000. I want to say 2011 or 2008. So
I know that really speaks to longevity.
The next thing I want to bring up is his Hall of Fame.
Sure.
Oh, actually, before that, so he was in the Olympics. He won the first ever UFC Heavyweight Championship, but he also was the first ever Pride Grand Prix winner in the year 2000. Which was also tournament style, I believe. That's one he definitely...
He's the first to do either?
Yeah. He definitely had to fight 3 times in one night for that one.
He should be the mainstay. You should be naming that BMF belt after him.
I know, right?
Especially the way you just handed that. You just put that on the waist of a BMF these days. That'd be a perfect representative to going forward, just to keep doing that.
Yeah. And that was May 1st, 2000 at the Tokyo Dome in front of 38,000 people.
I didn't know that one. I didn't know that he was the first Grand Prix winner.
Yep. That's pretty wild. So, yeah, the Hall of Fame, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame at UFC 82 in Columbus, Ohio, where the main event was Anderson Silva versus Dan Henderson. That's so cool.
Doing it relative to his hometown. I know you said he was born somewhere else in Ohio. I'm sure it wasn't far. But that's really cool to be in Columbus for that, right?
Yeah, yeah. And the card was pretty good.
What'd you say? I'm sorry. What'd you say the main event was?
Anderson Silva versus Dan Henderson.
Wow, that one. Okay, when you got him by rear naked choke. Okay.
And actually, it says here on the card that Anderson was the middleweight UFC champion. Dan Henderson, I think maybe that was his first fight in UFC because it says Pride champion underneath his name.
Oh, we're talking about Henderson now?
Yeah, Henderson.
I think they might have did that. Yeah, he might have been the last one. I can't remember how that went, but I just remember he came over. I was excited about. Oh man, that was a big signing. When I heard they got Dan Henderson, I was like, oh, this is awesome.
Yeah.
I just knew what he would bring.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. That's awesome.
But yeah, they also had Czech Congo and Heath Herring. Evan Tanner was on that one. Chris Lieben, John Fitch.
R.I.P. Evan Tanner.
Yep. But yeah, it was
That's
a great card.
Cool. A lot of big names on that.
Yeah, and they inducted him into the Hall of Fame. He was number 5. He was the 5th UFC fighter to be inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Which is also amazing.
Who else was in the Hall of Fame? I think it was Hoist Gracie was number 1.
Okay.
Ken Shamrock was number 2.
Sure.
Dan Severn was number 3. And then Randy Couture was number 4.
Wow. It's a who's who. It's a who's who of... yeah, are you kidding?
Speaking of who's who, let's go through some of the people he's fought.
Yo, are you kidding? Oh, yeah. Yep, you said Couture, Randy Couture. Let's see. He's fought Randy Couture. He has fought Shogun. He has fought Stephan Bonner, Fedor multiple times. So now Shogun multiple times. I know it's Crow Cop multiple times, I believe. Don Fry multiple times. Crow Cop might have been once. Don Fry multiple times. You got Pedro Hizzo on the list. You got Pete Williams, Maurice Smith, Dan Severn, Gary Goodridge. I'm sure I missed some, but it's like, man. Remember I was telling you about Igor Volchanchin, Fujita, Big Nog. Damn. So, wow. That's a big who's who, huh?
Yeah, I mean, they're all like heavyweight legends.
It's
right?
crazy. Yeah.
It's wild. Yeah. And he beat a lot of them.
Yeah. Win or lose, you're fighting the top. It's just, that's how it goes. But especially I think that's what makes MMA so great.
Yeah.
You figure it's like, you're not written off if you have a few losses. It's about what have you done lately a lot in MMA, which I think is cool. I hate when they go like, oh, but I beat you 2 years ago. I'm like, yeah, but I just kind of like when they run it back right away, and it kind of builds really nice trilogies instead of waiting until someone's not quite at that same point. And I think there's a lot more. Whereas as opposed to MMA, they just kind of you figure out what was it, Figueiredo and Moreno? Would they fight 17 times, Jim?
I know, right?
Yeah, so it's like I kind of like that though. It builds these really cool rivalries and divisions, and especially in divisions where they might not have that new blood yet that they need.
Yeah. And he was also supposed to, I can't remember what, actually I could find it. He was supposed to fight Brock Lesnar. And he got injured, and that was when Heath Herring stepped in to fight Brock Lesnar. So it was one of Brock's first couple fights. Heath Herring was like maybe his third fight in UFC or something like that.
I didn't know that. That's crazy. Yeah. Imagine if that went down.
My God, that would have been crazy.
Wow.
Was that UFC 100?
No, because he
fought at UFC 100. He fought Stephan Bonner.
Yeah, he beat him via decision. No, I don't. I can't remember which one that was.
I'm looking it up.
Okay. Because that's interesting. I did not know that either.
Oh, UFC 87 in 2008.
Okay. Which would have been better for him. You figure just the further back as opposed to when, this is the craziest sport to be having longevity in. So it's just like the fact that he was going that long is crazy in itself.
Yeah, and he wasn't
like young. Any of these guys.
He wasn't a young guy then either.
No. So, man. But yeah, it's crazy, man, looking at all the names he's fought and like you said, a lot of them beat.
Yeah. It's wild.
Man,
Yeah, Heath Herring was his third fight in UFC.
wow, man, that's really cool. I wish that happened.
Yeah.
I really wish that happened.
And then they talked about fighting. I read somewhere when I was doing a little bit of research on Mark that they had always talked about him fighting Randy Couture, but they didn't fight till way later.
Yeah, it was one of those ones you wish it happened sooner. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I do remember.
They fought at
I do remember the
109.
fight. And I think a lot of it's not any other knock on these guys other than just the grind that their life and career has been. You figure like a knee maybe or something. Once you get into that, plus it was back then when I'm sure they weren't. I don't know. I don't think there's as much for someone to deal with a knee as opposed to now. But you figure just follow the time in general. It's just not something you can really fight off for too long, and that man fought it off for, God, I mean, as long as just about anyone, right? So
Yeah. And like nowadays, UFC fighters are like, I mean, they are literally professional athletes. They're taking care of their bodies. They have nutritionists and trainers, and
it's different.
they take care of themselves. Not like, I'm sure Don Fry and Tank Abbott and Mark Coleman, like they'd go fight 3 fights and then they'd go to the bar after and maybe do a couple lines of blow or, it was just a crazy.
This is what makes them legends.
they were living loose,
Let's be clear. That's what makes people legends, in my opinion, in my book. So
yeah, and then still being able to go to the gym the next day. It's almost like old school pro wrestling, like Ric Flair, like going
especially
to the bar and
yeah.
drinking them out of their, tequila or whatever.
Wild. Still does it. But
yeah.
I mean, yeah, it was a different time. So it's like we're just lucky that we were able to see a lot of that, and then also seeing how great these athletes are now. Watching today, it's like Mark Coleman would say the same thing too, because he's a fan of it just like anyone. It's like it must be amazing to watch the level that some of these guys are at.
Yeah. Also, something I wanted to mention about I should have mentioned this earlier when I was talking about him in college and stuff. But his college roommate and wrestling partner was Kevin Randleman.
Wow, that's awesome.
And so they were really good friends. And Kevin Randleman passed away right around the time where he was
as well, yeah.
in like UFC and doing really well for himself. And that must have been really hard on Mark. And
big time, absolutely.
Yeah, Kevin Randleman was a beast. They were just
talk about another beasts. One. No, yeah, absolutely. Just very similar fighting style in a lot of ways, where they were looking just to go through you, however that meant they were going to do it.
Yeah, that's crazy. I'm gonna have to go back and watch some old UFCs now and I did watch a couple of their fights, but it's just wild. I remember, so when I first moved to town when I lived back east, we got a membership at a movie store, like a Blockbuster, but it was a town movie store. It wasn't Blockbuster. And they had a whole sports section. And my dad and I, when I was a kid, so this was when I was 8 years old. So at the time, 8 years old, so that was 94, 95, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They had UFC 1, 2, and 3 on VHS.
Oh, wow.
And we took it out because my dad we used to watch boxing all the time. We used to watch Tyson and Holyfield and De La Hoya and all them. So my dad had heard about it because he'd heard about UFC because one of my cousin's father he was really deep into the martial arts world at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so my dad had heard about it from him. And he's like, "Oh, I've heard about this. We should check it out. You want to check it out?" And I'm like, 9 years old, 8 years old. I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it." And so we rented the first 3 UFCs, or at least the first 2.
That's awesome.
That was the first time I saw it when I was like 9. And then
that's cool. What a valuable friend that was for your dad, just because that wasn't that known back then.
I know, it's wild.
So it's like it's just cool to know someone that's like, "Hey, check this out," because not many people were even talking about it, let alone watching it. So,
yeah, I know, and a lot of people that did know about it didn't like it, because it's like gladiator fighting, and John McCain was completely against it up until like, I don't know, right before he died.
yeah, I believe, he was He was always against it, it's always frustrating when you hear that. It's like I've always looked at it, if people are willing to watch and then the people are both willing to sign a contract to do that, I don't understand what the problem is. Like, you don't like it, look the other way. Like, it's had nothing to do with you.
Yeah, you can go bungee jumping if you want. Why can't you?
Or you can just sit down on your couch, dude. But like, let people do what they want to do. Like, I never understood that, because it was like, it wasn't hurting anyone. No one was forced to. If people were forced to, you'd be like, Jesus, no, stop it. But
yeah,
that's not what was going on. So,
and look at what it's turned into. You have, the UFC is probably, well, I would say they're probably one of the top organizations in sports for like anti-doping and stuff like that. As well as CTE and, all the, with the PI Institute and training and health and.
Sure. And nothing's going to be perfect with something like this, a sport like this. It's dangerous. It's just like NFL. They have their own issues. It's a dangerous thing to sign up for, but no one's forced to do it. That's most of these people's dreams and goals in life. So it's like, why would you deny that?
Yeah.
And it's just, it's amazing that it's become what it's become. And the balls on the people that have been the people that hung by, Dana Whites and the Fertitas and I know there's other names I'm forgetting, but it's like the people that backed it when they were so far in the hole.
Yeah.
And it was so not cool. And it was so, whatever, pick an adjective. It was not looked at as the future, right? Now look at it.
And that's why I think these flashback episodes are important, because you can see the change over time. And Rogan has said this before. It's a sport that's changed more than any other sport.
I don't think anyone could argue that. Yeah, I really don't.
And even like in the last 10 years, this sport has changed. 2014, like look at the champs that were in 2014. And
all you have to do is rattle off names, right? You rattle off names today in this division, then you do it 10 years ago, then you do it 10, like then you'll be like, okay, yeah, that's all you have to really do. Then you start thinking of those fighters. It's just, I don't think anyone could argue that. Even like you said, 10 years or so.
Yeah, and
2014 was so long ago in terms of MMA.
And if there was no Mark Coleman, if Mark Coleman never existed and never did UFC and never fought and didn't want to be that guy who was bigger, faster, stronger, then we wouldn't have guys like Brock Lesnar. We wouldn't have guys like, Max Holloway and all these dudes that are fighting now.
They're all watching. Yep, they were all watching growing up, and it's just the same thing that people always say with musicians. It's all that like inspiration. It's like that's an important point to make. That's why I'm glad you said it. Like with fighting, there's so many people that were watching as kids that were inspired to do exactly. They're like, I want to do what that guy's doing, because that's a superhero right there. That's kind of how I looked at Mike Tyson when you see him in there. Well, that's a superhero. I don't give a shit about Superman. This is a real guy.
Yeah.
Like that's how I looked at it. Like, not even kidding. Like, I was like, that's a real person out there.
Yeah, and they like guys like Mark Coleman open the doors to ideas that young people have and what they can accomplish with their lives. And I mean, look at all the things that he accomplished in such a short amount of time. If he can do it, some kids saying I could probably do it. I think I could do that. Let's go. I might be able to do a little bit more too. Like, I don't know. I think that's
how he would think back then, right? I'm sure that's how Mark Coleman thought when Mark Coleman was watching the whoever that inspired him. He was like, I could take it to another level.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of mentality you have to be that successful in those type of things.
Yeah.
So it's amazing. Nothing short of amazing, right? I mean.
Yeah. Mark Coleman, man. What a guy.
Salute to an absolute legend, pioneer, the OG, the godfather of ground and pound. I mean, come on, Jim.
He's the man.
You said, I don't know as much about this part. Did you say he did, or he was going to get into like pro wrestling?
Oh, he did do pro wrestling for a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
I never saw any of that.
There's a pro wrestling promotion in Japan called All Japan Pro Wrestling. It's still around, I'm pretty sure, today. And he fought there for a while. The thing with Japan back in the day, especially during Pride and all that, a lot of Japanese fighters and pro wrestlers, they did both. So
Mhm.
pro wrestling is mostly choreographed and planned out for the most part. But in Japan, they had a thing called strong style pro wrestling where it was very stiff. And so, like, they would actually fucking hit each other, you know? So, a lot of these guys in
Back then,
Japan,
especially.
in that time it was like a crossover thing. They would do Pride and they would also do All Japan, and they would just change it up depending on the event that they were on. So a lot of those guys, like I'm sure Mark Coleman, just from fighting in Pride, knew a lot of the pro wrestlers that were big in that area in Japan and in the early 2000s.
That's cool. I bet that's a guy you want to make sure you hit lightly if you're doing it for.
Oh yeah,
You don't want to get the return fire from. Wow, that's cool, man. I didn't know that part. So that's why I knew when you said that, I was like, we got to make sure we talk about that a little bit too, because something I know nothing about.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, and there was money
And
to be
Japan's
made
really
over there
known,
too. There was money to be
right?
made.
Okay. In Japan, isn't it always been pretty much known for having like a lot of wrestling talent, like as far as just having the interest, putting on the shows, doing big, and they have like a really good product, right? Isn't it been the thing?
Yeah, if you're in pro wrestling, well, I don't know about anymore because it's totally different
Sure. Oh, you sure?
thing now. With but back in the '90s, especially, if you wanted to be a good pro wrestler in the States, you would always go to Japan. Japan was
Okay.
always like a pit stop in your early career to like learn. Everyone would
hmm
go to Japan. Like Bret Hart went to Japan. Ric Flair always went to Japan. Like they all went to Japan.
Well,
And they would
that's
fill
cool.
out stadiums like the Tokyo Dome, like I said, like 50,000 people for pro wrestling and Pride events. It's crazy.
Man, I wouldn't it be cool if someone somewhere decided to bring something like Pride back? There's got to be. I wonder if it's still a desire or like if there's a market for it. I wonder if the Japanese people are still into it the same way as they were,
Yeah, I wonder
because they
if
were such like
I
so
wonder.
polite. So like the way they would be, they're very quiet. There would be like a round of applause when they'd have like someone like pass a guard or do any type of little thing. Otherwise, I don't think that most American fans even today are even realizing what's happening to the same way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah,
remember watching those Pride fights where they would have like it'd be a round of applause when they get like half guard and you'd hear a
yeah.
round of applause. You're like, oh, they're clapping because of that.
Yeah,
It's pretty
because they
cool.
know. Yeah. Same thing with
Yeah.
same thing with the wrestling. They would
Okay.
it's not so the pro wrestling back then, it wasn't so much here like, you have your good guys and your bad guys. I mean, they still had that, but they
Mhm.
would applaud talent and technique over like characters, you know?
Sure. I wonder if it's still. I just wonder if that would be something that would be feasible today.
Well, you
Like
know
I would
what?
love if that was a thing.
With you just talking about that, I was like, has UFC ever done an event in Japan?
That's a good question. And
And they
if the
have,
answer
but
is yes, it's been a long time, right?
it was not. I just looked it up. It's
Oh,
1997.
okay. So but that kind of still jives with the Pride. So they really haven't then since Pride. So
Yeah,
right,
yeah, but that's
wasn't
my
Pride
thing.
still
Like
then?
they should do an event in Tokyo. It would go over so well. They love combat sports and martial arts in Japan. I don't know why that's why I guess they usually plan events around big fighters now. Like that's why they want to go to Africa and they want to go to Spain now because of Taporia. But
Sure.
I would imagine you put together a decent card and go to Tokyo, it's gonna do really well.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And you figure it's funny that I was even asked when you asked me that. It just wasn't even thinking of that. Like, yeah, of course they did because I remember like Chuck Liddell. He had fights against like Guy Metzger. He knocked him out. He knocked out Alisar Overeem, and it was in like a Pride type. So I remember he had those fights, and then he fought Rampage and lost. So like
Yeah.
I know he's had. They kind of put their representatives up against each other. So I shouldn't. I did know that, but I forgot it was there. And that'd be cool if they would do something like that again. I wonder if they will.
Well, I mean, the nice thing about UFC now is they can go anywhere. They can do whatever. But yeah, I wonder.
Yes.
Actually, I'm gonna look up maybe eventually, maybe after the podcast. But there's got to be some kind of MMA promotion in Japan that's just not nearly as
that we don't know about.
Internationally known or anything, but there's got to be.
I know in Singapore they have one which is like a very good product. I don't know if you've watched their live fights, but when you do catch them, they're very good.
Yeah, and they do
The talent is
multiple
very good,
styles of fights too, right? They do like just jiu-jitsu or just
which is cool.
Muay
Yeah,
Thai.
I like that.
Yeah, that is cool.
Yeah, we got our boy Mighty Mouse. You know, like, I mean, you kidding me? Talk about one of like, that's one of our that we agree on too. That's one of our favorite fighters collectively, as far as just pound for pound, just to watch. Like, people just didn't seem to give him his proper due back then. And a lot of it's just because of the smaller weight classes. But man, they were missing something there if they didn't see it big time.
Yeah.
You know, technique wise, and just is unreal. I just saw a video of him imitating a bunch of styles. I don't know if you saw it, and they like superimposed the actual fighter over him.
Yeah, I saw that.
And it's like, it's pretty cool. It's like you're watching it, like he just knows, and it's all on the spot too. So I really don't know if I doubt they were like, here, we're going to do these 7. I don't think he put that much thought into it. I think they probably just, you know, he just knows. Plus, he knew what the names they were going to throw out. Like Connor was one, and then Cejudo was funny. And then, it was cool.
Sugar Sean, when he did the basketball shot.
Yeah, he did that, the basketball one. That was one of the first ones. But did you want to, any final, make sure we do a final salute to Mark Coleman?
Yeah.
I know we kind of just
Yeah, I mean, we said it before. I mean, we've been saying it the whole time. Like, if anybody's a bad motherfucker, it's the first ever UFC heavyweight champ, the first ever Pride Grand Prix champ. This guy fought multiple times a night in tournament style with no weight class, sometimes no gloves.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, a NCAA Division I champ. He got 7th in the Olympics for wrestling in 1992. Like, I mean, his credentials say it all. But what said it all the most for me was, I don't know, UFC Hall of Famer. Him running into a burning home to save his 80-year-old parents is just, it's a different level, man. Like, and you know what's cool? I didn't know this. I didn't mention this earlier, but you can watch his his Hall of Fame induction from UFC 82. It's on the UFC website. So I might even put that as a link.
You should. I'll probably watch it this afternoon. Nice.
And he actually walked out with his 2 daughters, like he did in
I did
UFC.
see the clip of that. Yeah, that's really cool.
So they kind of recreated him walking out for his Hall of Fame induction at UFC 300, which was really cool. And he's just like a humble dude, you know. He's just a great guy, and hope him and his family the best, and I hope his parents are doing all right. And
absolute legend. You figure, but why would you be surprised that someone like that would go into a burning building to save his parents when he was literally like he fought in the times where he's probably popping the mouthpiece, like, not like, what are the rules? Like, what can I do? Like, just tell me what I can't do. Like that's back then when it was just like, that's how crazy it was.
Yeah.
Like, all right, I can't bite. Okay, I got you. Everything else cool? All right, let's go. Like, that's crazy, man. You know, so salute to an absolute pioneer and legend. I mean,
I guess.
Thank you.
Yeah. And with that, I guess the last thing before we finish up, we could talk about, there is no UFC this weekend.
Boo.
But are we going to watch, what's it called? The Karate Combat tonight with Luke Rockhold and Joe Schilling?
Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah. That's tonight, right?
I believe so. Yeah, that's what you told me, right?
It better be, Jim, because if we missed it, we're going to be so embarrassed. Unreal. I'm pretty sure. I was only kidding that I didn't know if it was like last night as opposed to Friday, like saying Friday, but I'm almost positive you're right. It is Saturday. We talked about it.
And
it was like a week from 300.
Because you've watched that before, and you actually sent me the link last time. How do we watch that? Do you know how to watch that?
It's pretty cool. I believe it, as long as it hasn't changed. I watched it on YouTube. I believe I want to say maybe 2 or 3 times, definitely 2. And I'm pretty sure it's on YouTube again, but I could be wrong. But if not, we're getting it, Jimbo. It's going to happen.
Okay.
Say it and it shall be done, Jim.
Do you have a computer or something near you where you can look at the next UFC card next week?
Yeah, I can check it on my phone real quick. That's easy. All right, next week. You want to talk about that real quick?
Yeah, we'll just go over maybe if you see 1 or 2 fights that look interesting to you. I'm looking at it right now. We got Tim Means is fighting.
Always love a Tim Means fight.
Ryan Span's fighting. And then Alex Perez and Mateus Nicolau.
Nicolau's really good. That dude can crack. That's a good fight, man. I would lean towards him, even though it's a very good matchup. But do you know what they're ranked? That's the only thing that they don't really show on the ESPN app. What are they ranked, Jim?
Yeah, Mateus Nicolau is ranked number 5 in flyweight.
5, okay.
And Alex Perez is 8.
So this could be, especially for someone like Nicolau, who I think is kind of trending. I think he's one of those guys that could be trending upward. Okay. I think a win here, he could really catapult himself. Because I think Alex Perez he has fought for a title. I don't think he won, but he's just another really solid top 10 guy in these Shark Tank divisions.
Yeah.
So it's like, it'll be an interesting fight. And I'm pretty high. I like when Ryan Spann really shows up. He's tough to deal with. So that's a fun. I believe I've seen Bogdan Guskov once, but I'd probably lean towards Spann as well. And then you have a really good, was Ariane Lipski. I've seen her. I don't believe I've seen Karine Silva fight before, but I also think she has like 7 wins straight via submission, and I want to say 6 out of 7 are in the first round.
She's it says here she's on an 8-fight win streak, 9 wins by knockout, and 8 wins by submission.
Wow. Yeah, I want to say she has 7 submission wins in a row, and they've all been first round except for 1, which is like, that's talk about someone getting to work and knowing what they want to do. And so that'll be interesting because I don't think I've seen her much. I want to say maybe once, but that might be the number 1 fight for me, to be honest. Like, I try not to include the main event because a lot of times it's like people pick the main event. It's like, no shit, you picked the main event. That's why it's the main event. So I kind of like to pick a little one on the out, but sometimes you can't deny it. You're like, all right, look at this main event. But no disrespect to this one, but I'm excited for that one, man. Lipski and Silva. Anything jump out to you?
No, like I said, you know all these people a lot better than me, and as we do this, and as I watch more and more and more, I'll get to know some of these names too. But I know a couple names like Ryan Spann.
Yep.
I'm looking forward to him, and
it's a good card,
Tim
man.
Means, I haven't seen Tim Means in a while, right?
Still at it. I mean, the Dirty Bird. I believe that is his nickname, which is just hell yeah, dude. What a fun fighter to watch, man.
Oh, one other thing, real quick, before we end up finishing here. There's been, I don't know if you've seen anything from Michael Chandler lately talking about this fight coming up with Conor McGregor.
Yeah, real quick, before you get into that, we'll do a big, like a actual podcast on that fight card.
Yeah.
We just want to touch on it. Okay, yeah. No, I saw that too, man. So do you think he's just going to give him the runaround and just kind of like hop out and fight Diaz or something after?
No, what I was going to say is that I heard that he's hinting at something. He said something like he wouldn't be surprised if they changed something up and made this fight for the 165-pound championship.
Holy shit! Really?
He said that. He's.
What are they waiting on, man?
I know, but then they'd have to change welterweight to 175, right? They'd have to change things.
I mean, you wouldn't have to, but it would make sense to. Yeah. And then I don't know, man. I don't see many drawbacks of that.
This has been a discussion for a long, long time, probably like 10 years.
And Jim, think about it, dude. Real quick, think about it. We were just talking about BMFs. Dana White just talked about it. Leon Edwards had 3 separate opponents given to him for 300. He said yes to all 3. What better fighter to be like, hey, it's 175 now? He's not going to give a shit, dude.
No, he's
like,
not.
He's like, that's your belt now. He's like, whatever, man. I don't care. So it's like, what better, So it's like, I don't know.
That would be interesting.
It seems like a good time. I hope that's just not a rumor, man. That would be pretty sick. I mean, just for the fact that belt's going to be a thing. Like, people can complain, they'll gripe about the wrong things and be like, Conor gets given everything. But it's like, it's not that, man. It's also, think about going forward, how cool that would be to have that extra belt there. That would eliminate a lot of those problems from 155 to 70.
Yep.
As far as people fighting each other.
That's
a lot of options
That's a
out there,
big gap, 15 pounds from lightweight to welterweight, and it always
especially
has
in
been.
arguably one of the best weights. I feel that what you circle that weight, I think that's like my favorite 15 pounds, like 155 to 170.
Yeah.
Like those divisions, I love those divisions. So if you threw something in the middle of that, I think there'd be something special, man. That's a good move. But what do I know?
Yeah, and it's just a little. He didn't. I don't know.
Put the feelers out.
Yeah, I think he's just doing that to.
Did you hear him say it? Did you?
I don't know if he tweeted it or he put it on Instagram or something. But yeah, he said something. I think that he's just trying to hype up and make the fight more. Obviously, he would like to do that, right? I mean, both guys would love for their fight to be for a belt, right? Everyone wants a belt. And it makes sense in terms of, like you were talking about, like the weight differences. I mean, we were talking about a 165-pound weight class forever. And then who better to do it than Conor McGregor? And it would put him in... he'd be the only one with a 3-division. If he won it, he'd be the only one to do 3 divisions, right?
Oh, okay. I believe so. Yeah. Because I know they're talking about Bajeda, and he's like that. He's someone that's right there. So we'll see. But what's interesting about this too, it's like I don't even think there needs to be a title, because when it went in and there wasn't one, and I was thinking, okay, so I feel like if Conor wins this fight, he can kind of, like, let's just say he did win this fight, which is I don't think I'm picking him to win, just because I haven't seen anything that's going to tell me otherwise until he gets a win against top competition lately.
Yeah.
And that's just, I don't think that's because of him. I think it's just because of what he's doing. He's doing everything but what he probably should be, which would be that 145 hungry. I bet you there's a big difference in the training and all that. But with that said, it's like, if Conor can win that fight against Chandler, however he wins it, it wouldn't surprise me if he starts. He'll all of a sudden Max Holloway rematch looks great, like to him.
Yeah.
For that, because he has that BMF thing. He always has a play or two that he's probably
that's
thinking.
That's the good thing about being Conor McGregor. You kind of call
and
your shots.
You can make any move you want. Yeah, it's like playing chess with someone that doesn't know the rules. Like he's just like, I'm going to go right there. And they're like, well, all right.
And here's another thing I'm going to surprise you with that I heard this morning.
Dude, I love surprises. Mm-hmm.
Ilia Topuria is talking about they're trying to target his fight for the Sphere in September.
That makes so much sense.
Now imagine him against Max in the Sphere.
Oh my God! Give me that. Give me that. I'll take that. Which is, I know they were already talking about that, but I was just throwing out another thing, just because if Conor McGregor wins a fight, and if he wants to continue, a lot of people are going to have to take a back seat to a lot of things.
Yeah,
so most likely, but I'll take any, the way we've always been, Jim. We just love it. So all these matchups are all great. We'll watch any of them. We were conflicted going in, and it's more just because we didn't want to see, like when we were watching Gaethje and Holloway, it's like I had no winner I wanted to even pick. Like a lot of those fights, they're just fighters that every single time I'm announced that they're fighting someone, I'm excited. And it doesn't matter the opponent.
Yeah, we're like,
and then they're matched together.
Can they both win by any chance?
Maybe if Gaethje got a right hand of his own on at the same time, imagine that. That was like the only way that's going to be more crazy. I mean, imagine Mark Goddard then. Because isn't that funny that he said, I forget, I'm going to forget the amount of years, but I think he said he's been doing it like, let's just say 20 plus years. And he said that's the first time I've audibly yelled something. Yeah. Did you see that? He's like, oh my God, it's over. It's over. Yeah. Which is, speaks to the moment, right? It was a big moment.
All right, Dan, let's wrap this one up.
Put a bow on it, Jim.
For any of you listening out there, thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting us. We got our podcasts up on YouTube now, so that might make it a little bit easier for some people to listen if you don't have Spotify or whatnot. But you can find us on Spotify and now on YouTube. Our YouTube username is the same as our Instagram, which is Pinnacle_combat. So find us there. I'm still having a great time doing this, man. I appreciate you calling me every week, and we had a great time in Denver last week. So
phenomenal.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Dan.
I appreciate you you're the one who's doing, just to make it known, you're the one who's doing most of the work. So I appreciate you for doing that. It's easy for me just to jump and talk about something jump on the phone, talk about something I love, So I appreciate that you're putting in the work doing it, man. So
it's all fun for me, man. I went to school for
I love
audio.
That. You love hearing that.
It's a good time for me. I like doing it. So
I knew you did, but I just didn't. That's the best things that don't feel like work. So that's great that it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah. All right, man.
Well, many more to come, Jimbo.
We'll do it again next week. All right.
Hell yeah. No, that's a good card. No, I was just looking at that card. I try not to look at those too much early on because there's a lot of fights that we got a lot to talk about with that one. That's a really cool card.
All right. Well, till next week, man.
Jimbo, I'll talk to you then, dude. And everyone, thank you for listening. Really appreciate it. Anyone who ever does, that's just awesome. So thank you.
All right. We're out. Peace.
All right, Jimbo. See you.